Sorry, there we go. Welcome back to the Done Deal Show. I'm joined as ever by the brilliant Ben Jacobs. How are you?
I'm good. I thought due to popular demand, the request was if Ben Jacobs comes on the show, then you've got to mute him. So therefore, that explained the silence at the beginning of the show. But I'm good.
Do you know what it is? I never normally mute my mic via StreamYard, and it just was. Apologies, viewers. I know you all waited. I also set this up wrong earlier, and it said it was going live at 3. I got back from the gym, and I was like, oh, everyone's waiting. Sorry, it was meant to be at 4. So apologies, viewers. Do us a big, big favor and smash the like button, please. Let's get this past 500 likes while we're live. Lots of updates to come. Chelsea, new board. We're going to be delving into that. We're going to be looking at Raphinha, updates on Sterling, and a few other things surrounding there. We'll move on to Arsenal with what's going on with their signings. Of course, everybody wants to know what's going on with Jesus and everything else. Raphinha's name over there. Also, some updates on Manchester United as well. But we're going to start today's show talking about a team outside the Premier League in PSG. Of course, Poch seemingly won't be. He's actually officially gone now. I'm actually lost in that news, but they're looking to move him on. There's talk of Neymar being allowed to leave as well. That big breaking news last night that Neymar could be on his way out. What's the kind of latest with the managerial situation and Neymar thing at Paris Saint-Germain?
So Mauricio Pochettino has not been officially announced as departing, but Nasser Al-Khelaifi did an interview yesterday with Le Parisien where he was talking about the managerial search. So it is obvious and 100% confirmed by sources that Mauricio Pochettino has left Paris Saint-Germain. But in terms of a formal announcement for that, it's been delayed because PSG want to line up the replacement first. And in addition to that, the actual package through which Poch leaves has not been finalised. So exit talks are taking place with Pochettino, but he will leave. And concurrently, PSG are in advanced negotiations with Christophe Galtier at Nice, and Nasser Al-Khelaifi confirmed that there's no secret in that. And the oddity about the search for a new manager is there's been false reports really over the last 3 weeks or so that Zinedine Zidane was going to take the role, that he was in Qatar, that he had agreed a deal. Some even said Jose Mourinho was in the mix. And I've been reporting for weeks that both of those names were false. Zidane was on the shortlist. Jose Mourinho was not, but no contact was made with them because PSG were first and foremost trying to work out an exit package with Pochettino. And since Campos has come in, his number one choice has been Christophe Galtier at Nice. So now the next stage, and it's still probably going to take 10 days to 2 weeks, is to agree a financial package to get him out of his Nice contract. Some say that's as high as 10 million euros that PSG will have to pay. PSG sources deny that and say that that figure has not been touted, and talks are not yet that advanced to be speaking about the kind of figure. But what's clear at this stage is that PSG are likely to announce Christophe Galtier. There's no other candidate rivaling him for the job at the moment, and it is definite that Mauricio Pochettino will be departing, and Nasser Al-Khelaifi's interview obviously said that. And I think the final thing I want to say is that it feels just a touch disrespectful to Pochettino for Khelaifi, even though he can't say things have been finalised yet because they're still talking numbers with Pochettino. But to come out and do that interview and talk about the search for a new manager before officially saying Poch has gone doesn't quite feel like the right way of going about things. And Pochettino remains very much liked and respected, and it wouldn't remotely surprise me if we see him back in the Premier League quite soon.
Well, there's a lot of people that want him to be the England manager because although Southgate's done very well, it really seems to have gone a little bit stale. And I mean, I wouldn't be adverse to that myself, but that's just my take. But it's funny, really, because when you actually just Google PSG new manager, it's just Zidane's name still that's everywhere. And I've seen your tweets and I've seen your reports, I've seen your articles. And it does sometimes strike me as odd that people don't read them. Not necessarily just yours, but lots of like prominent journalists, yourself included. You've really been leading the way on this story that it's really not going to be Zidane. Yet every day I say, oh, Zidane's going to Paris Saint-Germain. How do you think he's going to play? And I see the timeline. I think to myself, why are you not reading? Why are you not reading the news from the credible sources on that? There's a player that though, that I saw a tweet last night. It was kind of in French from a journalist, translated again, Google like sort of Twitter translate. I don't take it word for word, but they spoke about maybe the exit of Neymar. Now, I know, again, your journalist has really been talking about Neymar a number of times this summer. Firstly, there was a kind of the very loose links, predominantly from fans to Chelsea. But could Neymar be on his way out of PSG? And if so, could the Premier League be a destination for him?
Very possibly. I mean, my understanding remains that Neymar would like to return to Brazil and at the moment is happy at PSG. And it is, as you would expect, I suppose, being strongly denied by PSG that Kylian Mbappe somehow gets a say and thinks it's time that he moves on. But what was interesting was that in Al Khalife's interview about Neymar, he simply said, when a question was posed about whether Neymar would stay, we can't talk about these issues in the media. Now, when you see that on paper and perhaps don't hear the tone and things can be lost in translation as well, it's sort of easy to think that's a little bit coy. And usually when a club wants to keep a player, they say something more like, Neymar is ours. We don't anticipate he's going anywhere. He's happy at the club. He's contracted to PSG. But Al Khalifi really sat on the fence, and that's what's fueled speculation that maybe Neymar will look for his next challenge. There's not many clubs that are going to be able to afford him, and I've been told categorically that he doesn't want a next move to be MLS, but Brazil is a very likely destination. Juventus have been tracking him as well. It remains to be seen whether they can afford the package and the wages. And then within the Premier League, there's been loose links with both Newcastle United and Chelsea. I actually don't think that Neymar is that enamored by a move to the Premier League, but due to links with Thomas Tuchel, there may be a possibility for those two to link up. And that's obviously been a factor in the case of Dembele as well. But right now, I think that Neymar is content to stay in Paris, but if he is pushed out because it helps with the financials, then a return to Brazil is still the most likely. And then you're looking at clubs, as I say, like a Juventus, possibly a Newcastle and a Chelsea. But these are very loose links at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel that. I mean, he's 30 now, and he's one of those players that feels forever young, if that makes sense. I still think of him as this young, up-and-coming Brazilian. Maybe at 30, he feels, I want to go back home. I want to go live there. I mean, he seems to be back there enough during the course of a season. He misses 2 months a year on birthdays and parties and other goings on. So maybe that is kind of the best place for him. And I think that with the money that Neymar would cost a Premier League team, if he isn't bought into 100% wanting to be there, I wouldn't do it. And that's not about his ability. That's just, I get the sense if he was signed for a team in England, that you'd probably get 3 or 4 months in and you could see, how Man United had with Alexis Sanchez. There was almost that he just didn't want to be there after almost arriving and it could become a problem. But certainly going to be an interesting one. Viewers, where do you think he could end up? Make sure that like button is being smashed. Make sure you're subscribing to the Football Terrace. Comment here says, Italian teams cannot buy Neymar. They don't have the money to spend. Listen, clubs have money when they need to have money. Like, everyone pretends to be poor. There's money when people need money. Neymar's a bum. He's not a bum. That's just, come on. I love football fans. Football fans are the best with things that they come out and say. Excuse me. In terms of back in the Premier League, Ben, of course, it was a very crazy end to last week. Obviously, we spoke on the Tuesday, and then from sort of Wednesday through to Saturday, the Arsenal news went absolutely ballistic. Gabriel Jesus, the bids were coming in. It was moving forward. There was obviously the signing that kind of came out of nowhere of Fabio Vieira. What's the kind of latest, as far as you're aware, with Arsenal in terms of their pursuit of Gabriel Jesus? Some reports from Brazil saying it's kind of de facto done deal. It'll be completed once he finishes his holiday. And then various others talking about there's still some personal terms to agree, or maybe the fee with Man City. What's your understanding around Gabriel Jesus and of course, the reported cooling of interest in Yuri Tielemans?
So with Jesus, Arsenal remain the front runners, and I think that signing is very likely. Jesus, as I understand it from sources close to the player, is very much sold under the Arteta and Arsenal strategy. And by strategy, I mean they've sold that move to him based upon a focal point in the team. And that is in stark contrast to Manchester City, where he was rotated and his game time was limited. And if you look at Tottenham, who have shown some interest as well, but haven't really advanced that over the last 10 days or so, it's quite difficult to sell to Jesus at Spurs where he fits in a team and how it's any different to Manchester City, because Kane and Son are there as well. Arsenal, on the other hand, are in desperate need of a focal point and a goal scorer that can get, let's say, 15 plus goals, and that will probably make the difference between finishing fifth and qualifying for the Champions League. If they had Jesus last season, I think Arsenal would have been in the top four in place of Tottenham Hotspur. So that's the kind of selling point, that Arsenal will give him the regular game time. He'll be a first name on the team sheet, and the terms will probably see him earn around 220,000 a week. I know there's some reports that think it's more like 270,000 pounds a week, but I've been told that that estimation is a little bit high. But as ever with players, there are incentives that allow them to earn a bit more if they hit certain individual or team targets. But the talks are advanced, and I believe, verbally anyway, that Arsenal and Manchester City have now agreed upon a fee. So City originally priced Jesus at 55 million. Arsenal tried to make a comparison with Sadio Mane and pitch an offer informally of closer to 35 million. Manchester City were having none of that, and they're highly likely, as reported weeks ago, to kind of compromise somewhere in the middle. And Manchester City essentially want 45 million as a kind of base fee, maybe a little bit extra if you count the add-ons, those that are likely to be guaranteed. Nothing's 100% guaranteed, but appearance add-ons are more guaranteed than goal-scoring add-ons based upon targets. So City have said, sources I've spoken to, that 90 million is what they effectively want as a base for the combination of Gabriel Jesus and, if they sell him, Raheem Sterling. And they think that both players are of equivalent value. So I don't think Arsenal have now got any problem negotiating a fee with Manchester City. And I don't think they've got too much of an issue finalising the bits and bobs in terms of the package with Jesus. Talks are ongoing in that respect. It's a big week as far as negotiations are concerned. And Arsenal have no reason to believe that they won't get the deal done, because Chelsea and Tottenham have kind of backed off at the moment and left Arsenal to see whether they can get this deal done. So I think that deal, that move of Jesus to Arsenal, is now highly, highly likely and will probably be completed over the next 7 to 10 days. With Tielemans, it's a slightly different story, not necessarily because of Fabio Vieira's arrival, which caught a lot of people by surprise. Vieira can play in an attack-minded role or more like a straight midfielder, and therefore, if he ends up being a sort of 10, there's room for Tielemans. If he plays more as a number 8, then arguably Arsenal won't pursue Tielemans. But it's incorrect to say anything other than Arsenal haven't advanced things with Tielemans over the last 7 days. So the feeling before Vieira from sources was that Arsenal would swoop in after the international break and they would get Tielemans done. Instead, they progressed things with Vieira, but Tielemans is still on their radar. It doesn't mean that they're going to aggressively go for him as a priority before the month is out. And perhaps that was the original plan. Sources certainly intimated that. But Arsenal have put in a heck of a lot of work in this Tielemans deal, dating back a year. They've agreed terms with the player, but at no point, as I said the last time we spoke, had they tabled an offer. And that remains the case. Arsenal have not yet placed an offer with Leicester City, and there will be some negotiation there. I think Arsenal have always felt they wanted to pay 25 million. Leicester have always wanted somewhere closer to 30, 31, 32 million. And Leicester may ask for add-ons on top of that, rather than just splitting the difference. I know there's some reports out there that say it's 25 million for Tielemans plus an extra 5, so the deal's already at 30, but that's not my understanding. My understanding is that Arsenal want to pay 25 million all in, and Leicester City want 30, 31, 32, even a little bit more all in. And they would still have to come to some kind of negotiation or compromise if that deal gets done. So Tielemans isn't off the table, but it is true to say that Arsenal have backed off for now And it remains to be seen whether they come back a little bit more definitively and aggressively later on in the window. I still expect Tielemans to leave Leicester City, though. I don't think that he will sign a new deal, and Leicester will want the transfer fee. So the other factor in the Tielemans deal to bear in mind is that as/when another club come in for Tielemans, that then will force Arsenal to make a decision. And they may well be waiting to see what other interest comes in for Tielemans, because they're not in a rush now, having brought in Vieira. And once the window comes into the second half and starts to close, if nobody else comes in for Tielemans, it can be a tactic where they then go to Leicester and lowball them, and Leicester would then have a choice between letting the window shut and keeping Tielemans, but then not getting such a big fee, or selling him and breaking even from the fee that they paid Monaco. And of course, if another suitor comes in, then Arsenal themselves can get played as part of a game, and then Leicester benefit because they can play two suitors off each other, but then Arsenal would have a decision to make because they have to come back in the race, or they have to let the other club come in. So this is just part of the sort of gamesmanship of a transfer window, that Arsenal and Tielemans are still in some contact. So it isn't impossible that they will get Tielemans and Vieira this window. It's just a little bit less likely it's going to happen before the month is out.
Yeah, and I think back to Ramsdale, and it was a couple of reports last season that Arsenal had pulled themselves away from Ramsdale, and of course, then they ended up. And there was one journalist who kept on the Peter O'Rourke was like, no, they're still looking. They're just calling. They'll come back. They'll come back. Trust me, they'll come back. And a lot of Arsenal, because Arsenal fans weren't so keen on that transfer. They were like, it's fine. We're not spending money on Ramsdale. Like, how that has changed is crazy, but. Yeah, I think it can be about price. And of course, every team, although Arsenal are looking to spend big money, have to budget, especially when the scenarios such as Raphinha rears its head. Because, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was no sort of talk about the Arsenals and the Chelseas maybe getting involved with that deal. If he sounded Barcelona bound, for one reason or another, Barcelona haven't been able to move forward with any transfers yet. They've not even been able to register, as you've mentioned on the show many times, the Kesses. They're trying to string Man United up for more money, but they can't. It's really a weird scenario with them. I don't quite know what their angle is right now, if I'm being honest. But Raphinha is seemingly available. And of course, Arsenal have had a bid rejected. David Ornstein and a few other journalists have kind of spoken about that. But the word is Arsenal are not going to pull away. You've also got Chelsea in that mix as well. And like, we will come back with you as to Raphinha and where that could end up from Ben's point of view. But I wanted to kind of, before we talk Raphinha, I wanted to kind of go into the Chelsea conversation, because I think it's relevant to understand what's going on at Chelsea before we talk about a move for Raphinha, if that makes sense. I think from bringing it all together, the last sort of 48 hours or so have been really interesting, because there was this thought, I know, very credibly reported by yourself, I believe, and if I'm wrong, please shoot me down, that the Bowley group were looking to maintain an element of continuity with the likes of Marina and Bruce Buck for a while. Something seemingly happened behind the scenes where two of them are gone. There's talk of Petr Cech maybe walking away. What's the latest on the Chelsea board situation, and how do you think that's going to impact the transfer market for the West London outfit?
Well, first of all, to kind of clarify the reporting on this, I've always said that Clearlake Bowley, even before they were successful in buying Chelsea, would come in the door and then assess senior personnel. And the challenge of buying a football club when the senior executives that perhaps want to stay at the football club are determining who wins and who loses is you have to take one tactic when you're buying the club, and then after you've bought it, you're obviously in control of the hiring and the firing. So it was always likely that Bruce Buck would only stay for a transitional period, and he remains on at the club as a senior advisor. And I reported back in early May that if Buck left, Todd Bowley was likely to be the chairman, and that is what has happened. And what that tells you is that it was really always the plan for Bowley to be chairman, which means that Bruce Buck's days were going to be numbered. But again, when you're bidding and Buck is deciding who wins, you don't necessarily say that explicitly until you're through the door. And that is the challenge of buying a football club. Marina was more of a two-way conversation because she wasn't sure on her future and is hugely admired by the new ownership group. And the reason why you act quickly with somebody like Marina is simply because of the position that she's in. It's the same with Dan Ashworth when he moved from Brighton to Newcastle. You want to make it clear early if somebody like that is going. So then there's a handover and contacts are aware of who they need to get in touch with. And that's why Bowley is the interim sporting director. And also, through no fault of Marina's or any other sporting director, the longer they stay on when it's clear that they want to leave, the more likely they are to legally and inadvertently, if they continue to work on transfer windows, gain information that if they go to a rival could prove very useful. So sporting directors tend to leave quickly and be placed on gardening leave. And Marina, unlike Buck, is not a senior advisor. She is going to kind of be an interim director almost as needed in case there's any questions. So there's still a kind of transitional period going on, but Bowley as chair was always likely. And then flanking him is Jonathan Goldstein, who will sit on the board. Originally, Goldstein, because he's known to be a Spurs fan, actually didn't think he'd take a position on the board, but now he will. And Goldstein is effectively the de facto CEO. And that will remain the case until an actual CEO is appointed. And Chelsea will also look for a permanent sporting director. And Berta at Atletico Madrid is one of the names on the shortlist, but there's nothing advanced. And Atletico are saying that Berta will continue to work through this window, and they are hoping that there won't be any change. But again, you would expect Atletico Madrid to say that as well. What we're seeing is the Chelsea ownership group making their mark, restructuring and starting a new era. And some fans might be worried that Bowley is seemingly doing everything, but not a lot has changed because Bowley and Goldstein come in. They're much more proactive than, let's say, a Bruce Buck. And then Buck and Marina are still there to help and advise. And obviously, a lot of plans were put in place before the new ownership group even came in for this transfer window. So I don't really see it impacting Chelsea that much, but it's going to get busy for Chelsea now because they're behind other clubs in terms of their incomings, and they've still got some outgoings to be resolved. And Romelu Lukaku yesterday did agree the loan move to Inter. The club's finally fixed upon a fee, and he'll now pass a medical early next week. But there's still the futures of Azpilicueta and Alonso to deal with. And then there's obviously replacements needed everywhere in defence, in midfield, and for Lukaku. So Chelsea are going to be busy over the coming weeks.
They certainly are. And I think that when this news kind of broke as to them moving on and there being this quick transition, it started to make sense why there hadn't been huge transfer activity for Chelsea. There'd been a kind of a panic from Chelsea fans. Why are we not moving? Why are we not operating? Well, sometimes you've got to get your structure right behind the scenes first and kind of move forward. I think what's really encouraging for a lot of Chelsea fans to hear is that Todd Bowley wants to get behind Thomas Tuchel, wants to buy Thomas Tuchel his targets, which I think there are rumors that Lukaku wasn't. We've seen in the history of the Roman era that at times he's bought people that managers didn't necessarily want. And I think that each of those signings has not really worked out and has frustrated fans, managers, and everybody else alike. So it's going to be intriguing to see how that kind of transpires and moves forward. But of course, there's a number of players they're looking at from an attacking point of view. Raheem Sterling, there's Ousmane Dembele that's reported today that it was, again, I'm talking here like Google Translate on Twitter. This journalist in Spain said that I think it translated to Dembele's about to have his pants pulled down and sign his new deal. It really made me laugh because I'm sure that's not what he said, but the translation brought it in like that, which was great. But there's Sterling, there's Dembele, and of course now there is also Raphinha of Leeds that is seemingly available. What's your understanding around Chelsea's pursuit now of these attacking players? How do you think it will be prioritized with this new regime?
So I think actually the priority remains a defender, but we can start with the attackers. Dembele is in a difficult situation because Barcelona don't want to and really can't at the moment financially increase their offer. And even if they could, they will be caving on a position that they've maintained for the past 6 weeks or so. And that's Dembele's only offer. So as much as Thomas Tuchel admires Dembele and would like him at the football club, there is nothing that's actually been put down officially at this point. And it's going to be an interesting dynamic because you've basically got Dembele who would like to go to PSG. And that's the simplest solution for him. but PSG sources have denied that they've started any talks or that they have any interest in the player. So then if you take PSG off the table, he's likely to have a straight choice between signing at Barcelona again or alternatively going to Chelsea. Signing at Barcelona is what Xavi wants. Dembele in the second half of the season was phenomenal. I think he got 13 assists in just 19 appearances, and he fits perfectly into Xavi's system, but he wants more money. If Chelsea make a formal offer, then Barcelona have got an interesting and difficult decision to make, because they may have to match it, and then Dembele will have a straight choice. And if they don't match it, I believe that Dembele will go to Chelsea over Barcelona. But at the moment, the more likely scenario, because Chelsea haven't advanced anything, is just that Dembele's going to have to sign something or he'll be without a club. Now, maybe Chelsea and others are going to wait for the contract to run down in its entirety and then swoop in a bit later when there's more desperation, as Dembele wants to clarify where he's going to play, and then they could get a better deal. So I think the whole Dembele saga will drag on unless Barcelona U-turn and make a better offer. And Xavi seemingly has floated with the board whether there's any leeway to get the wages up. And if there isn't, it's going to be difficult to see Dembele signing at Barcelona, because he's blanked Barcelona over the last few weeks. He's not happy with the deal on the table. For balance, I should add, Dembele was stopped by a fan at a set of traffic lights and asked if he's staying at Barcelona, and he said yes, but you would expect that from a player. Frankie de Jong obviously has intimated how happy he is at Barcelona, but we all know that Manchester United are doing their best to sign him as well. So it's a really interesting dynamic, because Barcelona kind of want to keep him, but also could do with offloading the wages from their wage bill, which is why they're not going to up the wages. And Chelsea want him, but have not actually put an offer on the table yet. So long and short of it with Dembele is that he only has one viable offer right now: sign the deal he doesn't want to sign at Barcelona, or be without a club. And then Chelsea are the most likely destination if he ends up leaving Barcelona. With Raphinha, there's other clubs that are more advanced than Chelsea. So I think that is a less likely deal to happen. And Arsenal within the Premier League and Barcelona are the two leading clubs at the moment. But don't be surprised if Chelsea do advance their interest if they bring Hakim Ziyech into the equation, because my understanding, talking to Leeds sources separate to Raphinha, is that Ziyech, should he leave Chelsea, has been a player on their radar. So there might be a possibility to do some business with Raphinha coming one way and Ziyech being given to Leeds, because Leeds don't just want a chunk of money for Raphinha to the tune of 55 or 60 million potentially. They would love to have a ready-made replacement. And I think that they see Ziyech as a viable option, and that will remain the case even if Raphinha goes elsewhere, because I think Chelsea would be perfectly willing to sell Ziyech if there's three players in a sort of similar position and Chelsea need to offload one of them out of Werner, Pulisic and Ziyech. Ziyech for me will be the one that goes. Pulisic will stay at Chelsea. There's no truth in links with Liverpool, even if they choose to add another attacker, with Mane obviously going to Bayern Munich today, but Nunez already there. So the most likely scenario is that Chelsea will try and hang on to Pulisic because of his age and potential, and therefore Werner and Ziyech could be made available to go, with Ziyech being the more likely. So that kind of covers some of the attacking options. Jesus is obviously another attacking option for Chelsea, but as I said before, Arsenal are ahead. And then in the defence, which is the priority, Jules Kounde drags on. And I would say on Kounde that it's not necessarily fair to blame the new ownership group, even though there's some reports that talk of Kounde's people being frustrated. I think any club dealing with Sevilla that's not prepared to pay the release clause would be having the same problems. But Kounde's agreed a 5-year deal with Chelsea. It's just a case of whether Sevilla are going to hold out for the full release clause, or Chelsea are going to get him for, roughly speaking, 10 million less. And then delete is a possibility. Koulibaly, Napoli playing a bit more hardball, and Chelsea's preference is delete over Koulibaly, simply because one's 22, I believe, off the top of my head, and the other's 30. But Koulibaly would be a fantastic signing. I still think Juventus will try and come in for Koulibaly, but Spalletti has kind of intimated to the board that if Koulibaly's sold, he might walk, and that's added a new dynamic to the deal. So as a consequence, Koulibaly might just be a little bit harder to sign than clubs like Chelsea anticipated. And then Chelsea will also look at a right back, and there's absolutely substance in the Jonathan Klaus links, which would be a move that is sensible for a bargain fee of only around 10 million. And Chelsea is Klaus's boyhood club. So watch this space with that one. And that probably tells you that Azpilicueta won't be persuaded to stay, which has always been the most likely scenario. But you never know, because unlike other players that are outgoings at Chelsea, Azpilicueta, as club captain, has always wanted to exit the right way and listen to the new ownership group. So it's still very, very likely that he will join Alonso in Spain. But don't be surprised if Chelsea don't find a right-back replacement like Klaus if Azpilicueta is asked whether he might be prepared to stay at the football club for a bit longer. But if you were sort of putting odds on it, it's still odds on that he's going to depart. And there's a very good chance that Klaus will end up joining Chelsea at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of those kind of moves where I don't ever pretend to have this encyclopedic knowledge of football. I saw the name. I thought it was German by the sound of it, but other than that, I was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And the good experience. I didn't realize the age that he would be. Like he's been around, but it seems like he's really had a bit of an uplift in the back end of his career, getting into the German squad and whatever else. So a good little bit of business there. And I think that when you've got a team like Chelsea that maybe needs 5 or 6 people to come in, those types of signings are kind of key, because you're never going to sign 5 or 6 50, 60, 70 million pound players. That's not going to happen. You have to kind of bring in some good players, some solid players that for those cheaper prices, as we've seen people try and do with free transfers like Christian Eriksen, which I know we're going to come on to later when we do a bit of a Man United and Spurs update. On Chelsea, there's a question here that says, "Hey Terry, please ask Ben if there's any Nkunku news."
Yeah, Nkunku is a player that seems to be linked with hundreds of different clubs, and all that it seems to have progressed to at this point is a player that Chelsea have heavily scouted over the last 12 months, but there doesn't appear at this stage to have been any reach out or approach to try and sign the 24-year-old. And that's probably because Chelsea's attacking priorities were 2 weeks ago Jesus, and now ahead of Jesus, and partly because Arsenal have advanced, are Sterling as a sort of lead target. And then Nkunku may be factored in either if they don't get Sterling, or if there's a feeling that they need more than one attacker, or of course if a Ziyech and a Werner left. But Nkunku is going to be in heavy demand. I know he's also a player that Liverpool have looked at in the past, but there's no suggestion really at the moment that Liverpool will add another Mane replacement after bringing in Nunez. They won't be in a rush, that's for sure. And I've said many times that Christian Pulisic was not allocated as a target to go to Anfield either. Manchester United have also looked at Nkunku as well. But the main thing putting off Premier League clubs, including Chelsea, is that Leipzig are hard ball negotiators, and the Red Bull Group has always been about kind of developing a player that can build clubs like Leipzig and Salzburg as well. And then when it's time to sell, cashing in, because that's the business model. So Nkunku is a £100 million player. And if you look at the fact Chelsea have only got about €8 million plus add-ons that could take that more like 12 to 15 million, depending on what happens with Lukaku's spell and how him to perform. And they bought him for well over €100 million, 97.5 million English pounds. Then they're going to have to bring in at least, I would say, 2 defenders. And if they pay Jules Kounde's release clause, that's about 68, 69 million. Then if you add, let's just say for the maths of it, 10 million for Klaus, and Koulibaly and Delete are going to be far more than that. And still there's the midfield challenge of trying to replace, even if one or both stay at the club, Kante and Jorginho, and then if Dembele joins on a free, there's wages there as well. So there's no way I can do the maths when Chelsea desperately need all of those incomings, and there'll be a goalkeeper probably coming to the football club as well, with Kepa maybe leaving, potentially going to Lazio, and Strakosha coming to Stamford Bridge. And Slelina is the other name if they choose to keep Kepa and have a young goalkeeper. So Chelsea will not have the financial means to add 100 million for Nkunku, but they'll be looking to try and shave the fee that Manchester City want on Sterling down to kind of 40 to 45, which should be possible. And then rather than having to then find 55 extra million for Nkunku, Sterling just is a better proposition at a good age with Premier League experience. So I think although Nkunku has been on the radar of many, many Premier League clubs, I don't personally think, and it is just my opinion, he'll end up at Stamford Bridge, but I do think there's a very good chance that Sterling will get over the line. And at the moment, for those maybe that have asked about Sterling, the situation, as reported a couple of days ago, is Sterling hasn't made his mind up yet, but Manchester City very much open to a sale as long as they get in between 90 and 100 million collectively for Jesus and Sterling together. So base fees of about 90 million plus add-ons taking it around or over 100 million. And Sterling's quite prepared to go to London, and Chelsea are very confident in agreeing personal terms and selling him his kind of role at that football club. So much like Jesus and Arsenal, which has not hit any road bumps and seems a logical fit, Sterling to Chelsea makes a lot of sense.
It does. I think Sterling to Chelsea is a fantastic signing as well. It's great age still. His productivity is there. They need someone who's putting those balls in the back of the net, and he gets kind of tarred with this brush of missing a lot of chances. But if you look at the last 4 years, I think his conversion rate average is about 27, 28% in the Premier League. He's an excellent football player. There's no doubt about it. And I think he can do absolute bits for them. They really, really can. And Chelsea fans, I don't know what it is. Maybe they're some Chelsea fans seem really up for it. There are some others who feel a little bit like underwhelmed maybe by it. But from my point of view, looking on the outside in, Raheem Sterling makes me feel like Chelsea will be far more dangerous, far more potent, far more productive in their attack next year. No doubt. No doubt. There is another player that Nathaniel's asked about here, Richarlison, because Richarlison has also been linked, along with Raphinha being linked with the move to Chelsea, Sterling, Richarlison's name as well. Is Richarlison very much a player that would be a kind of backup option if Sterling and Raphinha and Dembele don't happen? Or is it someone that you think Chelsea will actively pursue irrespective?
I think he's someone that, again, they looked at before the new owners came in. And the reason for that, so fans understand, is because much like when you are applying for a job, you make a short list of candidates if you're the employer, and that's not just one or two, it can be something like 10. And when a club like Chelsea anticipate that Lukaku is outgoing, they're not just going to draw up a short list of one or two. So Richarlison is a name that actually, if signed, would be a Marina signing rather than a Bowley signing. The fear, much like with Dembele, is the fit at the football club. And we all know that Richarlison is an explosive player, capable of goals, but moments of madness as well on and off the field. And Dembele falls into that category as well. But he scored 10 Premier League goals last season. And if you look at his record in the Premier League at Everton, I think he's got into double figures in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So a player that is available in the market, and there's a few clubs currently looking at him. Newcastle United are considering a swoop as well if they don't get Ekitike. So what's going to be interesting with Richarlison is where his level of ambition lies. Because if you join Newcastle United, you're going to get well compensated. You're going to be joining a relatively new project from the ground up, and you're a focal point for the future. At 25 years of age. Callum Wilson's in his 30s. Chris Wood is clearly not the solution if Newcastle are going to be challenging for Champions League football and beyond, although he could play a bit part role. So it would make a lot of sense for Richarlison to join Newcastle United for his career, where he will play week in, week out, and he can get the financial package. And let's not forget that there's some Brazilians at Newcastle that he knows and is friendly with, particularly Bruno, but also Joe Linton as well. He's got a good personal relationship with the former. So that, I think, is a move that Newcastle will ramp up, because the Ekitike deal may well happen, still more likely than not, but it's hitting some hurdles. And why not go in for both? Because Newcastle should have the financial power to do so. And in essence, over the next year or so, they're probably going to have to replace Callum Wilson and Chris Wood. So I think that if Richarlison's available now, you go to Newcastle. But Chelsea have ramped up their interest for sure, especially since they've known that Lukaku is going to leave. But he's on that a sort of long list of strikers, along with Victor Osimhen, Nkunku, Sterling, and Chelsea will probably only go for one, in my opinion, at least until there's clarity over whether a Ziyech or a Werner, or still long shot Pulisic is going to go. So don't rule it out, but there's nothing advanced at this point between Chelsea and Richarlison, as I understand it.
Absolutely. And another question in relation to Chelsea here from the viewers. Can you ask Ben about Declan Rice? I know there's some rumors circulating today on socials that that Chelsea will look to move to him. Is that almost a very similar situation to Nkunku in the sense of, because of the price, it depends on the deals for priority players, but before they go in for someone like a Declan Rice and the money that he would cost?
I mean, West Ham sources continue to say, and I know you have to take this with a pinch of salt, that Declan Rice is not available even for an astronomical fee. And the only thing that might change West Ham's mind is an offer between 120 and 150 million. And again, for the reasons I've already explained, Chelsea need about 5 as a minimum in all kinds of positions. And if Rice is one of them at 120 million, they will not be able to make the maths add up in this window. And again, I just don't think that West Ham are going to waver. The reason why it's picked up on social media is because actually of Armando Broja, who Thomas Tuchel wants to assess in pre-season. But the feeling is that Broja's wanted as a big priority by West Ham, around 30 million. So can Chelsea leverage that in a deal to get Declan Rice go the other way? And I've said many, many times, and we saw this with Lukaku and Inter, that swap deals are extraordinarily complicated because you're looking at two players and one of them might not want to go the other way. And Broja is really interesting because you have to look at it not just from Chelsea's perspective, but his perspective. He's been on loan at Vitesse. He's been on loan at Southampton. He scored, I think, 8 goals in the Premier League last season. So he now wants game time. And if Chelsea say, do you want to go to West Ham? And he says, well, actually, I don't. Then he won't be able to be leveraged for the Declan Rice deal. If Chelsea say to Broja, separate to Declan Rice, do you want to be loaned out? He may say no, and therefore they may have to either sell him on a permanent deal or sell him on a permanent deal and try and negotiate a buyback. But with Broja, Tuchel wants him back first to see what he's dealing with up close and personal, day on day, and then a decision will be made. But I think that people are kind of putting 2 and 2 together and saying, well, if West Ham desperately want Broja and they know they're eventually going to have to sell Rice to Chelsea, then why not try and get a deal done? And make no mistake, Chelsea would absolutely take Declan Rice, but there's just no way that they can or will pay 120 to 150 million. Some will be saying, well, Rice is worth 90, Rice is worth 100. But this is the point. Don't listen to what a player is worth, because it's not about fair market value. It's about West Ham United having all the control. So they can say Declan Rice is worth 300 million and everyone else can say, no, he's not. He's a 75 to 90 million player and we'll give you add-ons. But it's irrelevant because if West Ham don't want to sell him until January or next summer, they'll put whatever price tag they want on him. and then only an astronomical offer akin to, let's say, when Leicester somehow got 80 million for Maguire will get that deal done this window. So if I was a betting man, and I'm not, and my betting tips are terrible, by the way, but if I was a betting man, I would be saying that Rice will be staying at West Ham throughout the duration of this window.
There we go. Great, concise update in relation to that. There's a few questions coming in for Liverpool, which we'll go on to. We are going to speak Manchester United as well, with some interesting rumours circulating. Comment here by Thor, I want to address this. Is you said Arsenal would sign Raphinha yesterday. Today you say Chelsea will sign him. Such BS just to make money on your videos. Firstly, I absolutely attempt to make money from YouTube videos. It's my business. Second point, we never said that Arsenal would sign Raphinha. We reported the news that came from Sport that a bid was being made that was clarified by David Ornstein. We're also not saying today that Chelsea are going to sign him. We are asking Ben Jacobs a question because it's circulating that Chelsea might. There's a question mark in the sentence. Without trying to be rude, Thor, please read. What we can't do on the Football Terrace is only report the transfers that make your feelings feel safe, probably as an Arsenal fan. I actually had people DM me yesterday, Ben Gannon. You shared news that other clubs are looking at Raphinha. I said, yes, because that's the news. Oh, I don't want to follow you anymore. I only like it when you're being nice about Arsenal. I can't help it. I can't help it. It's an interesting one. Manchester United, Ben. De Jong prolonging. Eriksen, which we'll move on to. But I think before we move on to De Jong, I mean, you mentioned it to where we were talking beforehand, the situation surrounding Barcelona, because there have been a number of reports in the last few days that the deal for De Jong is kind of being held up by this sort of bottleneck that Barca have created because of their financial situation in terms of this they can only spend 1/3 at the moment of their money they receive from players on new individuals and salaries. They're kind of in a bit of a mess. Like, what's the latest with Barcelona, and how do you think that's kind of holding up the De Jong and other deals at, across Europe?
Well, Barcelona, I think, are just signing before they can, and then based on who they want to sign or have lined up, working out the financials to make it work. So they want Lewandowski, they want Raphinha, they're loosely in for Jules Kounde, and yet the club's in financial ruin. And Javier Tebas has said that they will not have the ability to bring in and register players, even if they agree deals, until there are outgoings. So I think Barca's fear is that if the outgoings are sorted first at preferable rates to the buyers, even if they're fair market value, then they still won't be able to bring in the players they want. So it's almost a case of lining up with an accountant what they have to sell a player like De Jong for and not budging on that price. Otherwise, they won't be able to bring in the long queue of players that they're hoping for. Let's not forget that they supposedly also want Azpilicueta and Alonso as well. And if they bring them in, they'll still have to add them to the wage bill. And if Dembele, for example, doesn't depart, there'll be no space. So they're in a really precarious position, and they are gridlocked at the moment. So Manchester United were, roughly speaking, 20 million apart compared to their offer, what they were prepared to pay for Frankie de Jong when they first came to the table, and the sort of 73 odd million that Barcelona were demanded. And it's logical to think in a normal deal that you would come to a compromise. But the reality is, if Barcelona can't bring in Lewandowski unless they get 73 million for De Jong, or they cannot go in for Jules Kounde, even though he's not necessarily a priority, I'm just using him as an example, unless Dembele gets off the wage bill or signs the deal he's got now, then they're in big trouble. So that's the kind of challenge at Barcelona at the moment. It's not just about their negotiation with a specific club on a specific player. It's the fact that every incoming is tied to an outgoing. And as I understand it, they've done the financials. They've pre-lined up offers and deals, what they're going to pay Lewandowski, what transfer fee they're going to pay for the various targets that they've got. But it's all contingent on those outgoings, which is why they're playing such hardball. And then the irony is that they may neither get a Lewandowski or secure the outgoing that Manchester United want, or potentially Chelsea want with Dembele, and could end up with a very similar squad to last season. And they have to be resigned to that. but it's almost no good to Barcelona, even though it helps their books, to get 60 million for Frenkie de Jong if it doesn't allow them to use that money to balance the books, to bring in a Lewandowski and pay for the wages of an Azpilicueta and an Alonso and so on. And that makes it a really complicated and maths-led almost summer for that particular football club.
Yeah, no doubts. It very much appears that, I mean, they kind of want to move De Jong on, as you say, but they kind of can't do it for the price that Man United are willing to pay. You probably get there's a sense that they feel, well, we'd normally accept that, but we can't because it damages things elsewhere. I mean, there was all talk about them selling their TV rights, but clearly that money isn't going to just suddenly be injected into their bank accounts overnight and leaving them in a better situation. So there is definitely a lot going on here. And I suppose with Frenkie de Jong, in terms of an update, very much as you said, there just appears to be a differential in terms of asking price. Man United still seem to be very, very keen on buying him. Do you think there'll come a point where Man United, though, might say enough's enough and we have to look at somebody else? Because you can't keep waiting for Frenkie de Jong, surely.
I mean, there'll come a point where they either place the final offer and then a deal is done or not, or they just leave something hanging and wait until later in the window to determine whether there's other outgoings at Barcelona or whether they cool on certain targets that they're trying to offset De Jong against and then just choose to take the money. So I wouldn't read too much into it because there's not a twist necessarily where a new club is going to come in and pay the almost 75 million that Barcelona want. And there's a long time left before the window shuts. So sometimes I think fans kind of treat these transfers like Championship Manager and they think, well, a bid's been placed or terms have been agreed. So then they expect progress every single day. But you can often in the transfer window take a step forward, 2 steps back, another step forward, 2 steps back, wait, and then finally make a new offer or a new twist, or there's a new bit of movement somewhere else and then a deal gets done. And that's the gamesmanship of the window as well, that Manchester United, in thinking at the moment that Barcelona have got all the cards, might just wait, turn their attention to another target. Barcelona might panic and go, yikes, they've got another target, and they might knock 5 million off the negotiation. Or you might get to a week before the window closes or the day the window closes, and Barcelona might be like, uh-oh, we're in financial ruin. We've now got someone waiting to be registered. Our only option is to let De Jong go. So this is the kind of dynamic. And when you follow the transfer window, you've got 2 choices, really. Number one, you look for day-by-day updates, and you're going to lose a lot of sleep and be very frustrated. And you're going to have to string together the twists and the turns and the ironies and the nearlies, because it's never that simple. Or you get a good night's sleep and you don't take it almost too seriously, and you judge your team based on when they return to pre-season, when they kick their first ball, and when the window shuts. And at that point, you should, in those 3 dates, see progression. Who's new when they first return to pre-season and is done early in the window? Who is new when your first 11 lineup is done at fixture number 1? And who is new by the time the window shuts? And then you then do the same thing again once the World Cup ends, and once the window opens, and once the January window shuts. And at that point, you may not learn the twists and turns and nearlies and maybes, but you'll keep a lot saner. And even though I have to report on the twists and the turns, as a fan with my team, Leicester, it's the latter approach I do, because otherwise I wouldn't have any hair left.
Mate, I totally agree. I enjoy the ride. I enjoy the hustle and the bustle and the to and the throw. There's another player that obviously Man United are linked with in the last few days. It seems to have really caught on fire. There's a report this afternoon that Antony has his heart set on Manchester United. I've also heard some reports, we're talking to some other journalists, that maybe things aren't as progressed as people have made out. Have you heard much about that at all in terms of Man United pursuing the Brazilian attacker?
I mean, Manchester United's interest is no real secret. The fee will be around 40 million. I don't read too much into this. Has his heart set? Eventually, as a journalist, when there's no offer, if you have to report on all the twists and turns that I just mentioned, you can only relay what sources are saying. And that tends to be words like confidence, admiration. And when you've run out of words, has his heart set? is a very poetic way. And if somebody gives you that direct quote from the player, that's a little bit different, because then you're getting genuine insight from the agent. But at the moment, there is interest and there is an acknowledgement that to prize him away from Ajax, only 22 years of age, the fee will be 40 million plus add-ons. And naturally, people are making links between Ten Hag and Antony because of the reunion factor. Tottenham are looking at him as well, for sure. And there's clubs outside of the Premier League interested as well. So I think this is a deal that Manchester United can get done. And rather than saying Antony has his heart set on Manchester United, more accurately, it would be Antony has his heart set, if we're to use that phrase, on playing again under Ten Hag. And that's the big sort of pull factor. Nobody's got their heart set on Manchester United at the moment that is a top footballer. And I don't mean that in a derogatory or flippant sense. I mean that in the sense that there is no Champions League football, there is no strategy, there is no structure. They've gone through caretakers, they've gone through failed managers. The culture of the football club doesn't allow you to have your heart set at Manchester United, because if you strip away the history and the fan base, which is great, you're dealing with a football club on the decline that haven't got anything in place to attract a top footballer when another club of historical equivalent comes in, which is why Darwin Núñez went to Liverpool rather than Manchester United. But Ten Hag is the kind of personality that has the ability to bring a player when a club above Manchester United, in terms of what they have next season, I mean only, i.e. Spurs and Champions League football, Ten Hag has that ability to lure a player over. So if United become stable and start the season well, and Ten Hag builds a culture and a strategy, and the outgoings help kind of build a more united dressing room culture, then top players will want to come to Manchester United. But right now, if Manchester United get Antony, mark my words, it will be because he wants to join Ten Hag, not specifically Manchester United.
And listen, I don't think there'll be a lot of United fans won't like hearing that. It's uncomfortable, but you're absolutely spot on, which is that there's pull in him. And of course, if over the next 12 to 18 months, the team plays well, back in the Champions League, things have settled, people are improving, players are getting better, then it changes things dramatically. But I completely agree. It's why we needed a manager of his level and the kind of influence he has and the kind of buzz around him, so that we are able to attract players. And look, as I say, I mean, the sources have said that he's accepted United or his heart's set on it, whatever it may be. They're fairly credible, so they've probably been given that quote. But you know, these kind of quotes get said all the time. As you say, we're living in the age of I want daily up. People often ask me, why do you do daily updates on transfers? Well, because people ask about them every day. So why would we not? And we're only relying on what's out there, and we're more fan based, so it's easy. We're just talking about it. Another player that United and of course Spurs and Brentford are all looking at, and we're going to update on, is Christian Eriksen. And it's been an interesting week, because if we think about it from a point of view of, first of all, there was reports from The Athletic that he rejected United. Then you had Alistair Gold say Spurs have kind of called their interest, stepped away. He said we had and living in London was no longer a priority. There was a report that not Champions League football wasn't a deal breaker. Then you had Jamie Jackson say that Man United had been rejected again. And then there was a further report yesterday that said that he's still considering all three options. So we've literally had the full circle. What's your understanding of the latest of Christian Eriksen and his next club?
So I think Manchester United, as I think we said the last time we spoke, have made a firm offer, and Tottenham have not. And it is unlikely that Christian Eriksen will rejoin Tottenham. If there was an offer from Tottenham, I think that there would be the desire and sentiment of Eriksen to return. But my understanding is that Tottenham will not make an offer for Christian Eriksen. And it's not even a case that things have cooled between Spurs and Eriksen. I don't think Spurs ever got to a point where they were seriously considering making an offer for Christian Eriksen. And they've moved very quickly in the window. Perisic is a great signing. If Tottenham wanted Eriksen, they would have swooped for him early in the window, because they are well aware that if they make an offer, Eriksen's going to pick Spurs because it ticks every box. My understanding is that Eriksen would like to remain in London, and that's what's still giving Brentford just a little bit of hope about agreeing a new deal. And Eriksen also has got a lot of respect and goes back a long way with Thomas Frank. So the first person that Eriksen will tell when he's made a decision is Thomas Frank, and don't therefore rule out Brentford. Other clubs that are looking at him that are a bit newer since we last spoke, Leicester City, who considered a January move, and Leeds United and Newcastle. But Manchester United are the most advanced. So this will work in a number of different ways. One, other clubs need to make formal offers so Eriksen can assess where he wants to go. And as it stands at the moment, he really only has a two-way choice in the Premier League anyway between Brentford and Manchester United. And I really think that he loved his time at Brentford and feels to some extent, if he's not going to join a Champions League club, that he owes that football club a little bit. But he's also aware that other teams can offer him more financially. So he has an idea at the moment of where he will go. That's the kind of message coming from the Eriksen camp with no real further intimation. But this is a really fluid situation because other clubs haven't tabled offers yet and will. So the latest really is that he hasn't rejected Manchester United. It's not impossible that he'll end up at Old Trafford, but it is absolutely true that if possible, he would like to stay in London. And I think he's delaying a little bit in the hope that somehow Spurs U-turn and make a bid, but I just don't see that happening. So it's just really intriguing because there's so much goodwill, and rightly so, to Eriksen. He did brilliant at Brentford. And upwards, if you count January and now, of 7 Premier League clubs, amazingly, so pushing 1 and 2, have looked at Eriksen, and therefore you would expect more offers. But right now that just isn't the case. So Manchester United, Brentford in the mix, behind them at the moment, but they could advance in the next week. Leicester, Leeds, there's talk of West Ham United still as well. And Spurs is the least likely scenario. And that's where we stand at the moment.
And again, that echoes a lot of what you said last week with a few additional updates as well. And I think it's intriguing, where this kind of his rejected Man United thing has come from. It just didn't make sense considering there's only really, as you say, there's only been 2 tables offered. And my logic was just, firstly, speaking to you, and I trust what you say. Also, why would you reject Man United now while you're waiting for all the offers to come in? Why would you move anything off the table until you know what's there? That typically, unless he just, I don't want to live in Manchester, no matter what you offer me, I'm not going to be there. And that doesn't really appear to be the case. So I think what you've said as well around that goodwill there is. And I think he was so good when he came back to Brentford. The fact that he's free as well, I think, is a big factor for Man United and a few other clubs maybe, because it doesn't eat into the transfer budget as much. He's not going to be on colossal wages. He's not going to be coming in on 250, 300 grand a week like maybe you would have had to have paid him 2 or 3 seasons ago, as it were. But look, he's a player that, as a United fan, I hope that we can bring in because he gives us great strength in depth. But I do get this feeling, the London thing, I think might matter a lot to him, not unsettling his family again, staying in one place, as it were. And as you say, it's not as if Man United are fighting for league titles in the Champions League. Look, we're arguably we're not run better than Brentford. We're in a better position than them, but yeah, I can understand why he'd want to stay. But there we go. Really appreciate your time as ever, Ben, on the show today. Viewers and everyone that's tuned in, it means a great deal to us that you've done it. There was a super chat actually, a couple that we want to do here. First one says, anything a Salah close to signing? Is Salah close to signing his new deal? Is what Mark Hines is asked to hear.
I think what seems to be the message from Liverpool, you would expect them to say this, is that Salah will sign a new deal at Liverpool. And I believe that it will kind of be a priority now that Liverpool have done the vast majority of their business. So the way that Liverpool works smartly is that they bring in all of their incomings first. And obviously they've negotiated the move and a decent enough fee for Sadio Mane to go the other way. Liverpool don't want to lose Salah. There is obviously talk that he's weighing up his options. Supposedly Barcelona are also in the mix as well, but it is just ridiculous how many players Barcelona have tried to agree deals with. This, again, is evidence, by the way, of how often a player just agrees a ton of different deals, even if they've got absolutely no interest of joining, or they know that there's no possibility of a club like Barcelona bringing them in, because it provides leverage as far as Salah's camp is concerned, going back to Liverpool, especially if they end up just having speculative or verbal talks with like a PSG or a Barcelona, because it's a way of upping the wages. But yeah, I do expect Salah to sign a new contract at Liverpool. And I haven't been given, through sources, to be perfectly honest with you, any kind of specific timescale on it, other than a confidence at Liverpool Football Club that will happen soon.
Thank you very much. A question for Ben: How much are United looking to give to get rid of Harry Maguire?
I don't think they're looking, honestly. You know, whenever he makes a mistake, whenever he gets caricatured or goaded, whenever the 80 million gets hung above his head, naturally people talk about an exit. I know that there was some slightly laughable reports, to be perfectly honest, that Chelsea might explore Maguire, which is totally not the case. But I think that it's far more likely that Maguire will stay at Manchester United but lose the captaincy rather than be sold. And if they do get rid of Maguire, obviously 80 million is not going to be the fee or anywhere close to it. But the reality is that as a Leicester fan, I can tell you this categorically: Harry Maguire was not an 80 million defender when he left Leicester City for Manchester United with a decent reputation. And that's why Leicester are so good at negotiating and selling their players. They get incredible fees of tremendous value, and then they replace them with cheaper players that turn into sellable assets, maybe at 80 million, with Wesley Fofana being the best example. So I think if you put value on Harry Maguire now, then you would probably be saying that he would be worth 40 or 50 million. And even then, Manchester United fans would laugh and say, how on earth? Like, he just hasn't lived up to even a tenth of his value since joining the football club. But I think you have to show Harry Maguire some respect. And actually, at 29 years of age, if he was to join another football club and get a bit more confidence back, it wouldn't remotely surprise me, without that price tag on his head and maybe playing at a club a little bit of a level down to Manchester United. So let's say he came back to my team, Leicester. I think he could excel again and prove himself to be a 30 or 40 million pound defender. But I just don't think Manchester United are putting any value on at the moment. They know they're not going to get their money back. And I think from Ten Hag's point of view, he'd rather assess Maguire without the pressure of the captaincy, and hopefully, in his mind, without the pressure of the price tag, and then see what happens. So I don't think United will sell Maguire. And if they have to put a value on him, it's obviously going to be nowhere near 80 million.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Finally, Avid Troop says, any other cams coming to Spurs, or that Spurs are going after?
Any other what, sorry?
Eriksen? Any other cams, any other attacking midfielders they'd be looking at outside of Eriksen?
Oh, candidates. Yeah, I don't really think so. Not necessarily in an out-and-out attacking role, because we're talking about a midfielder now and more defensive-minded. But Amadou Diawara, I should say, is the only other name that I'm hearing more and more about into the equation of Tottenham. Eriksen is not a candidate when we're talking about attackers from Spurs' perspective. So he'll be linked because of the return, but again, never been seriously advanced. So when linked, the interest may be there, because why wouldn't you look at the availability of a free transfer? But I don't think Conte has advanced that as much as people have said. If anything, Spurs maybe looked more seriously about that signing in January than now. The other names in an attacking sense are really just the ones that we've spoken about, including historically anyway, Gabriel Jesus, and they're aware that Arsenal are the front runners there. And then, you know, if we're talking about those kind of midfielders that can get box to box, let's not rule out a Yuri Tielemans, because if Arsenal call their interest and Spurs see value around 25 million, as the window gets a little bit tighter in terms of time left, who knows, Spurs could come back in there as well. But right now, Tielemans is short of options, very much in the same way that Dembele is.
There we go. Ben, always an absolute pleasure to speak, my friend. The viewers, the super chatters, all the new subscribers and members, thank you very, very much indeed. Make sure you hit the like button before you leave, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification. But until next time, take care, goodbye, God bless, and we'll see you.